acknowledge that that we're holding this event across many Noongar lands. You know, I'm speaking to you from Whadjuk Noongar country, and but some of you will be in further away places, and together we continue to care for country. And I would like to thank all of our presenters tonight. I am really delighted to see how many people have registered. And just, you know, I'll just keep on clicking as people come into the waiting room. We've had 60 people 60 people register. Whether everyone will end up here, I'm not sure. There's a rename function in your participants menu. If you've got something, some phrase like user, you know, it might be useful for you to just change that to your name. Thank you everyone for coming along. Thank you to our presenters. I do also want to introduce you to somewhere. So Jasmine, sitting behind a blank screen, we have an intern from the McCusker Centre working with us. So I do welcome Jasmine Nivathefa here, who's working with us and helping us with this project. And now the purpose of tonight, so there's Jasmine. If you can see, I mean, there's a lot of faces here. I know I've got 2 screens worth of people now. But the focus tonight is to share and learn more, so that we can make our responses to the Urban Greening Strategy Survey to put a biodiversity lens on it. This strategy will be finalised by year end, and it's a whole of government strategy. So we've, you know, this is the survey is an opportunity for us to have a say about diversity, and I'm anticipating that we'll have more opportunities later in the year to put our views. We've got a series of short presentations. We are asking that the presenters work to 5 minutes. We'll go through the presentations one by one, and then we will have a bit of a Q&A. I do really want to keep to our promise of finishing by 7:30, and there will be opportunity afterwards, you know, sort of following this for input. I just remind you, so we are going to touch on topics like the benefits of urban canopy around natural areas, wetlands, regional parks, heat island effect, growing local, and also advocacy. So we're covering a spectrum of things here tonight. So just, I think you're all on mute. So thank you very much for doing that. And there is the raise hand function that you'll be able to use when in the question and answer section closer to 7 o'clock. I guess in terms of so there's the chat function that you can put information into. It looks like we've got 37 participants in at the moment, so thank you everyone. And there's also the raise hand function. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Colma, and I'm going to admit the other 20 people who are probably lining up at the door. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. I am going, right, sorry. This is so you'll see tonight, so Nick Cook's going to look at benefits of tree canopy, and I won't go through these, I won't go through that now because we're going to go through that when people do it, but I'm going to share my screen and see if we can focus on some of the nature stuff. So excuse me, so right, Oh, don't you hate it when you're just not good at this stuff? Right. I need to go slide from beginning. Sorry about this. Okay. As you all know, Urban Bushland Council has a very strong focus on caring about natural areas and protecting them. It also has a very strong focus on supporting our member groups in this area. Tonight in particular, I really am focusing just on the urban greening strategy. So there are lots of other things we do and we would like to see done, but I'm just letting you know that I'm not actually touching on lots of those tonight. And I'm also very cognizant that I've seen the list of people that have joined us tonight, which is fantastic. And I realise that there's a huge amount of knowledge and richness of experiences in the room. And so I don't want to go back to some of the basics with you because you certainly do not need it. So what I was going to say is, first of all, as you know, we've got the Perth and Peel Urban Greening Strategy, and whilst UBC supports it and really looks forward to some fantastic implementation around urban greening, there's some concerns we have around the focus, and they include that it appears to be limited to planted vegetation at the exclusion of natural areas. I've just got to shift something on my screen. Whilst natural areas actually contribute to what they consider as canopy cover and how they do their calculations, canopy cover or habitat on private lands is not included. We're also concerned that planning and development legislation and policies, as we know, are having the biggest impact on the loss of natural areas and canopy cover. And our other concern is about, it seems that the potential for money that might come out of this, either by the government or via other investment, does not look like it's going to be for agencies that manage natural areas, even though they are important for us. I'm just going to quickly touch on this. It's as you can see, it's from 2016, but it gives us a bit of a snap of Perth's canopy cover. They were saying was close to 20% then. The Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage are telling us now that it's 16%. I'm not exactly sure how everybody gets their figures. They were saying that on average, and as I think you all know, and I won't steal Nick's thunder or James, I'm sure they'll tell you more about some of the canopy cover stuff and where Perth sits across Australia. One of the other bits that is startling is a reminder to us that 85%, or probably less these days, of Perth's tree canopy is on private land, and we all know about the impacts at the moment of subdivisions. And 51% of all local governments in WA have seen a decrease in their shrub layers, and often we've got to make sure we don't just think about trees, but we think about the lower areas, which we are tonight. And the other one was about by 2016, 41% of all local governments had experienced a significant loss of canopy. I'm just putting this in for a second, but it's just that bit, and I can send it to people about the canopy for local governments in 2021 in Perth. And the stars are Kalamunda Shire then with 63%, Mundaring Shire with 54%, I'm down the bottom in the green sections, the Swan with 33% and Armidale with 33%. And sadly, right up the other end are things like the City of Belmont, with less than 10%. But there's an awful lot of us, including my local council, which is only around about 13. So we've got a long way to go to get to that 30%. Okay, as I said earlier, with the natural areas, while they form part of the consideration of this 16% of canopy cover, they really aren't being covered, I don't believe, in this urban strategy. So I think it's up to us to get it in there. And it's about the need to protect and manage them for conservation so that we don't lose that canopy and all the habitat and everything else that comes with it. But we don't want loss, we don't want disturbance, and we don't want deterioration, because if we get any of those, that percentage of canopy cover is going to reduce. So it's really being clear with the government about natural areas contribute to canopy and they also need support. I've just used those great approved conservation advices from the threatened ecological communities to think about, you know, we need to protect the ecological communities to prevent further loss. We need to protect ecological communities within their range, and we need to communicate with and support. And I think that's one thing that this strategy is wanting to do, is to see more connection, more linkages, more collaborations across a whole range of organisations and individuals. I think the other huge thing is, from UBC's point of view, is agencies that are currently doing conservation management need resources and they need ongoing adequate budgets. And for some decades now, the government, state government, has not been putting the funds into those agencies, so they can't do what they need to be doing in that area of nature conservation management. And in particular, I'm thinking about, in this sense, the Department of Biodiversity Conservation and Attractions. And if you think they also, you can think about the national parks and things, but I know we all know that they look after regional parks, they look after lots of reserves, they look after some roadside areas. And of course, local governments, there's lots of local governments who are managing natural areas, and they really don't have the funds to do that. So it's looking about how they can also get more assistance to have some budgets for them to be able to do that. I'm thinking too about the bush forever sites that they manage. And the other thing is, as far as funds go, about looking for community bush care and land care groups who are actually doing a lot of the back work and the hands-on care of these areas. They also need support and resources for them to be able to do what they're doing, again, to be able to keep these areas healthy, so that they can be great habitat areas as well as be all part of the linkages. And with that, the other thing I wanted to say about natural areas is, whilst they're really important in their own intrinsic values, they're incredibly important in the whole linkage, ecological linkages. If we don't have good quality patches of bushland at the end of the various linkages we're talking about, whether they're diffuse linkages or quite direct ones, there's nothing that's going to be able, not nothing, but there's not much that's going to be able to start actually moving through those ecological linkages. Those patches are actually contributing the biodiversity, the fauna and the fungal and other biodiversity that can actually move through those linkages. The other thing too I wanted to comment on and remind us all is about ecological linkages and about how they are really important for natural areas. So they're not just standalone, as I'm sure we all know, but how critical they are for natural areas to make sure natural areas can get replenishment with species. And also another key thing I've found when I've talked to lots of people about ecological linkages, particularly in the community conservation sector, is lots of people think that an ecological linkage, because it looks like a sort of a scientific term, I think is possibly what makes us think this way, is that an ecological linkage can only be a natural area, can only be planted with, whilst yes, we definitely advocate using local native species, lots of people think that an ecological linkage can only be useful if it is planted with only local native species, and other things like people's gardens or local parks and those sorts of things aren't considered an ecological linkage, but they definitely are. And I think we need to keep reminding people how valuable and important these ecological linkages are for our natural areas. And as a short example too about thinking on the Shelley foreshore here some time ago, and that sort of mini habitat thing, we had a tree that the council did care for a long time near a path, and in the end they had to remove it because it became dangerous. It was deteriorating, and in the end, the Shelley Rossmoyne foreshore group creeper, we had a relocation day just with geckos alone, and in that one tree we ended up relocating 47 geckos to other trees around. And it's that bit too about remembering, and there's lots of fungi, there's lots of insects which often get forgotten. There's so many things that are moving through our ecological linkages, and including obviously then linked to our gardens and our street trees and our street verges and things like that. And that was where I was going to finish.
Unmute. Thanks, Colma. So in terms of what UBC has been doing, I'll just quickly update you with that. On the 27th of March, we did have a briefing with Nicholas Duffy from the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, and if you came along to that, we've also followed up and let you know that the video, the recording is actually available on our website. And our intention from tonight is that by the 24th of April that you'll get from us our guide for filling in your survey, so that on Anzac Day you've got time to fill in your survey. So so that's the things that we're working towards, and of course UBC will be making a more detailed submission, but we'll put together something that'll help everybody make a submission that's really really focused on natural areas. But now I would like to welcome our first Nick Cook, one of our speakers. Nick is going to speak on the benefits of tree canopy for health and wellbeing. Nick is the chair of the WA Tree Canopy Advocates, and we're really delighted to have him here tonight. So I'll hand over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Colma, and thank you, UBC, for hosting this event. Look, urban canopy is obviously critical to both our physical and mental health, but I have to be honest, I felt that talking about health benefits of tree canopy was probably preaching to the converted a little bit here. So I'd like to just sort of speak a bit more generally about the opportunity to be a part of this, to respond to this survey. I think the opportunity to shape the Perth Peel greening strategy is really a once in a generational opportunity. We are absolutely in the midst of a canopy crisis here in Perth, and on top of that, we have the borer that's wreaking havoc across the metropolitan area. I think 80% of Perth is in quarantine for borer, and I personally have my concerns about the eradication strategy and whether they'll manage to get it under control or not. Just to add to some of the statistics that Colma just threw up, Walgo recently made a budget submission to the state government, and in that they stated that Perth between 2011 and 2020 lost 25% of its urban canopy. That's a truly staggering, frightening number to me. We haven't had any data released since 2020. We also had a briefing from DPLH a couple of weeks ago, and were informed that the data has been flowing this year, and that it will be released in the second half of this year. So whilst we look forward to that data being released, I think we all know which way the data's going. It's going to be a fairly scary number when they do get that data out. But obviously you can't really have a greening strategy without it being based on data. So we're pleased to see that that data is going to be released. It is, from our point of view, it is absolutely critical that we generate maximum participation in this survey through all of our tree canopy advocacy groups, through all of our urban bushland groups, member groups. It's just absolutely staggeringly important that we send a loud and unified message to the state government that canopy protection and enhancement is a top priority for the people of Perth. Colma mentioned a few misgivings or reservations about the potential strategy. I share a lot of those concerns. I'll add to that. Another one is that it doesn't address any of the regional centres, regional urban centres. Our group represents not only metropolitan groups, but also groups in Bunbury and Geraldton. And these urban centres face exactly the same problems that we're facing here in Perth. The biggest consideration, I think, or the biggest concern in our opinion, is that Minister Carey has stated that the strategy will not consider, or it will be done in consideration of private property rights. And I think I really struggle with this notion of private property rights. You know, the eastern states has had protections on urban canopy for decades, and this notion that West Australians have a unique set of property rights as opposed to the rest of the country is quite odd and absurd. And I think it's something that may not be addressed in this strategy, but it's got to be part of the message that we send through our feedback, that this is a critical part of managing our urban forest. As one of the stats put up there was 80-odd% of our urban canopy is on private land. And I've spoken to, over the last couple of years, I've spoken to councils across Perth, and they all tell me the same thing. It doesn't matter how many trees they plant, they're still going on public land, they're still going backwards because of the losses on private property. So that's an issue that absolutely has to be tackled to effectively manage and enhance our urban canopy. And following on from that point, it was brought to my attention recently that in 2018, the West Australian Planning Commission published a guide for local governments. It was called Better Urban Forest Planning, a guide to support the enhancement of urban forests in WA. This guide states that planning should consider both private and public land. The guide advocated for protection of established trees in parks, streets, public spaces, and private spaces. That was 2018. So clearly the need for tree protection laws on private property is well understood. West Australian tree canopy advocates have two basic asks of the state government. And whilst we will be also publishing guidance on our website by the end of the month, these two basic asks that we have, we respectfully ask that your members include these in their submissions on the greening strategy. The first one being that the state government establish a 30% canopy target by 2040. That target is fairly widely supported. The West Australian Local Government Association is advocating for a 30% target by 2040, and I understand that UBC also supports that position. And the second simple ask of the state government is that they regulate the removal of significant trees across the metropolitan area, across Perth, and in the regional areas. We simply cannot afford to go on the way we're going on. And, you know, I know some people will make a point of difference over native trees or exotic trees, but I think we're in a position where every tree is crucial to be retained, and local governments certainly need to look at their tree selection. They need to look at their street tree master plans. We need greater diversity in our canopy. Diversity in our canopy is a basic risk management strategy, and many councils are wedded to their avenues of London plane trees or what have you, and particularly in the light of the shot-hole borer crisis, we really need to diversify away from from avenues of trees. So as I said, we'll be putting out more detailed guidance on our website by the end of the month, and so we'd ask that you keep an eye on our socials, and we'll notify everybody when that information gets up on our website. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nick. They are really important points, and we hear you, and I'm sure we all personally believe in those things as well. Those two lead items that you're listing. I'd now want to. I think Colma, are you now going to talk about wetlands? Or so is it?
Yes, sorry. I'm just sharing screen. I've just got to move. Oh, sorry, I've just got to move down a bit from the beginning. Oops.
So Colma's doing Phil Jennings's presentation on wetlands. So thank you for that, Colma.
And thanks to Phil, who couldn't join us, but I'm sure all of you who know Phil, he's amazing, the effort he puts into things and how quickly he also gets back to you, and he's constantly putting in great guidance. So what Phil wanted us to talk about was that wetlands and urban bushland are essential components of a healthy environment and a healthy society. They offer benefits including environmental, like wildlife habitat, carbon sinks, climate moderation, social, such as recreation, heritage, landscape enhancement, and economic, such as increased property values, social amenity, and water supplies. And as we continue to lose wetlands and tree canopy due to urban sprawl and infill, the urban heat island effect has worsened, and we have come to rely more and more on air conditioning and desalinization. These in turn produce more greenhouse gases, which contribute to the increasing climate change. In contrast, wetlands and vegetation cool the local environment and soak up carbon dioxide. Healthy wetlands require vegetative buffer zones, but sadly planners are still allowing development too close to wetlands. The Barnett government sought to strike a balance between urban development and environmental conservation, and they produced a draft strategic assessment for the Perth and Peel regions in 2015, and many of you would know it as SAPA. While this plan had many defects, it had a promising initiative. However, the McGowan and Cook governments have abandoned the SAPA and are pushing ahead with urban expansion and infill. Minister Carey's recent decision to veto the tree preservation policies of the cities of Nedlands and South Perth, thinking of what Nick was just telling us, is symptomatic of this obsession with the urban development, regardless of the consequences. The Perth and Peel urban greening strategy provides us with an opportunity to strike a better balance between conservation and development. We need to grasp this opportunity, as Nick reminded us, and make hundreds of submissions because numbers count in politics. In your submissions, it's important to note that the Perth metropolitan region has the lowest tree canopy cover of any Australian city. This is not an accident. It is a result of successive state governments refusing to allow local governments to introduce tree preservation policies like every other capital city in Australia has had for many years. This in turn is a result of the pressure applied to government by the powerful property developers who wish to maximise the lot yield of their estate. The EPA noted in 2007 that we have already destroyed more than 80% of the original wetlands on the Swan Coastal Plain, and that this destruction was continuing at the rate of 2 football fields per day. Many well-meaning public servants have suggested ways to address this problem of loss of tree canopy and wetlands, and they have produced some very useful reports and policy proposals, but nearly all of these have been shelved or stalled due to the lobbying by developers. The public consultation provides us with provides us with an opportunity to explain to the government and the planners that they need to act urgently to conserve and restore our damaged environments. The best way to begin is to immediately release and implement these long-awaited policies that were developed over the past 40 years with careful research and public consultation. And the key elements are the state planning policy 2.9, the water resources one, should be released and implemented immediately. The long-awaited wetlands buffer guidelines should also be released, along with the SPP 2.9. Bush Forever needs to be completed while we still have the opportunity. The regional parks must be expanded to include those planned in Nangara, in the Peel, the Lower Serpentine, the Helena, and the Upper Swan Rivers and Newell Brook. The Wetlands Conservation Policy for WA that was updated by the Department of Conservation and Land Management in 2012 should be released and implemented. Uniform guidelines for local tree preservation policies should be developed and released as a matter of urgency. The SAPA, or the State Strategic Assessment of the Perth and Peel regions, should be reviewed and completed as quickly as possible. Wetlands and urban bushland are under great pressure at present due to climate change and urban development. Once we lose them, they are lost forever. We must act now to halt the destruction, otherwise Perth and Peel are likely to become very hot and barren in the years ahead. Wetlands and urban bushland have a vital role to play in climate change mitigation and adaptation, and also for the social amenity of our city. The situation is critical. We are heading for a very unpleasant future unless we start to take more care of the health of our environment. This consultation gives us an opportunity to redress the balance. I urge you all to advocate strongly for the urgent action along the lines I have suggested. And he goes on to say, if you need further background information on this topic, I suggest you read the WA Biodiversity 2022 prepared by the UBC and the Wetlands Conservation Society in 2 years ago now. So thank you, Phil.
So I'm still
Stop sharing.
So thank you to Phil Jennings for producing that, and thanks Colma for presenting it. I think there are some really salient points in there, and we'll certainly take them into consideration as we develop our guide. There's just a couple of things that on the chat that I want to draw your attention to. Lee has provided us with a link to a media release about local governments taking so while the media release, local governments take the lead to protect mature trees on private land, and hopefully that goes well. And then Alex has let us know that Enviro House has created a web page to assist people in completing the feedback form. They'd welcome additions to this, and happy to include a link to the UBC guide. So thanks for that, Alex, and we will certainly forward the link around the Enviro House link around. So thanks for that, I think. And now I am going to welcome Jane Chambers and hand over to Jane. So Jane is the Director of Nature Link Perth, and she's based at Murdoch University in Environmental and Conservation Sciences, and she's going to speak about why we need green and blue links for nature and people. And I understand she's got some key words. So thank you. Hand over to you, Jane.
Yes, I have. Thanks, Christine. So I don't have any switch presentation, I'm afraid, because about an hour ago I was still looking after my granddaughter with croup. So yeah, so it's just going to be from the heart here, and I'll be succinct. This also is about the urban greening strategy, not generally. So these are sort of points or comments about the urban greening strategy, fairly general, but other people have commented on things that I thought they might, so that's really good. So why we need blue-green linkages for nature and people. Basically, our biodiversity cannot be sustained in the reserves. The reserves, as Colmo's pointed out, need to be the best they can possibly be, but without linkages, we will lose biodiversity. There is no question. So if that's the case, then when they start talking about green and blue linkages, they have to link to somewhere. Okay, so it's not just any old network of linkages that might form a nice pattern across Perth. They have to do work. So they must link meaningfully, and obviously NatureLinks and NatureLink Perth are keen for them to link protected areas or conservation areas. And if they do that, they will fulfill all of the criteria that the state government want them to as green linkages, but will also have the added benefit of sustaining our biodiversity into the future. I think it's a pretty important point. Secondly, links are required to enable people to connect with nature. So if you've got too far to go to actually get to nature, you're not even going to know it exists, and you're not going to benefit from it in any material way. There's been some comments been made in other areas about the 330-300 rule, which is every house should be able to see 3 trees. There should be a 30% canopy, and it should be 300 metres for people to be able to get to a natural area for their own mental health and physical health as well, and particularly for child development. So if we want people to have that quality of life, we need to have people being able to access nature through these linkages. The linkages not only work for biodiversity, they also work for people. So for example, the pollinators that are moving through those linkages are going to help you set seed in your veggie garden. They're going to be the birds that eat all your bugs in your garden. It's not just a one-way street. So it's about improving quality of life with these linkages. It's not just a kind of a nice, warm, fuzzy concept. And the third point I want to make about linkages is, as Colma has already pointed out, links do not just need to be in parks and gardens and natural areas or remnant vegetation. All land uses can become nature friendly, and that's one of the salient points that we have in NatureLink Perth. It doesn't matter if you live in an apartment block. You can put a banksia on your on your balcony. You can have a roof garden. There are many, many different ways that we can improve the greenness of Perth, and that includes both canopy and also understory. That needs to happen. So those are my 3 points under that. And as Christine mentioned, I wanted to mention some key words that I'd like, 3 key words. So this is it, and then I'll be done. So my 3 key words are multifunctional, integrated, and collaborative. So number 1, the urban greening strategy currently focuses on tree canopy and urban heat. Now, you can knock down canopy and heat with any old tree, and it'll give you some canopy and it will reduce urban heat. So tick. But with just a little bit more effort, you can get so much more. So it's a bit of a dangerous situation to be focusing on specific things and not mention the others at all. I understand why they're there, because they're the things that cause people grief in local government. But if you put the right tree in the right place with understory underneath it, then you get so many more multiple benefits, not just biodiversity benefits, which are substantial, but also resilience. Trees that are planted closer together with understory grow better. They provide more ecosystem services. And with clever choice of trees, you can have a much more aesthetic outcome with flowering across the 6 Noongar seasons. And there's just so much more that you can get. So as Nick has pointed out, this is a one-in-generational opportunity. Let's not like fritter it away on a couple of trees in a couple of blocks to try and reduce a bit of heat somewhere. All right, let's try and up the game a little bit, please. Okay, number 2, green space, and this is something that happens also, should not be considered a separate entity from the city. So we don't have like green space and then buildings or roads or grey space. No, we need it to be integrated. All right, so we don't just stop with our urban greening strategy when there's a bit of bare land. We also include when there's a street verge, when there's somebody's house, private land, residences, anything, any part of the city should be greened, and it should be integrated into the grey infrastructure if we're going to improve quality of life. The last one is that it needs to be collaborative. So we don't want a top-down prescriptive strategy that tells everyone what to do. It should encourage collaboration and participation of all levels: state government, local government, schools, community, industry, private, everyone should be encouraged by this urban greening strategy to get on board. So we should be looking for outcome-based solutions, not necessarily prescriptive-based solutions. So we can ensure that the more people we bring on board, basically, the more likely it is that it will be successful. And that's me.
Just got to find the button. So thank you very much, Jane. So from the heart, I mean, I guess we're getting a real sense of the opportunity that this process is setting out for our whole ecosystem, our precious bushlands and our precious, and what we need to do around where we live. So thank you for that, Jane. I'm now going to introduce Brett Loney, and Brett's going to talk about growing locals and where to get them. Now, Brett, do you want me to run the presentation, or will you do it from your screen?
No, can you run it, please?
Certainly. Let me just share screen here. Here somewhere. Right, I have got to find it now.
Showing up there, Kristen.
Sorry, it's just hiding on me. Two screens and right. Okay, now can you all see something?
Thanks for that, Christine. I'm going to talk about why locals, and in doing that, I'll suggest a bit of reading material for you. There's a book that was produced originally a number of years ago, and it's been...
You're breaking up a bit.
Am I?
What have you changed?
I haven't changed anything.
Okay, go.
Okay, so, and the book is called Growing Locals. It's by Robert Powell and Jane Emerson, and it gives you all of the information you need to grow locals in a greening space, from whether it be in your backyard, in your street verge, or in a local park. And I would refer that to you. What I'll talk about here is, in the next slide, is that there's a local plant species for every situation. And I think that's important to remember, that we've got plants that may not necessarily be the plants that were growing in a space originally, but there is a local plant species to satisfy the requirement for every space that we're going to put plants in. And most of them, some of them are available commercially, some of you might need to go to more specialist plant nurseries, Australian plant nurseries. Next slide, please.
So next slide.
Yep. Site conditions change, and we need to select our species accordingly. This slide here is an aerial view of an area that's just north of where I live. It's between Singleton, Medora Bay and Singleton. And that's currently what it looks like. And there's a regional park on the right. The areas that are bare between the railway line and the bush around the wetlands have recently been replanted with trees and subsequently been planted with understory as the trees grow. The area to the right or to the left of the, you can see my cursor. This area here was all once a limestone quarry, and so go back one, Christine.
So, yeah, so sorry, Brett, I'm not really hearing you particularly well. So do you want the next slide?
Yes, please. So some species, we require species for some special sites, and street verges are an interesting area. This is on a corner. The Australian road design safety standards ask that we keep vegetation down to 0.5 metre high. These plants that are planted in here were expected to only grow to 300 millimetres. But with the pruning that's occurred to keep them as they've spread away from the road and the facilities, they've grown quite tall and they end up requiring pruning on a quarterly basis. The site on the right hand, back one, Christine.
So yeah, Brett, sorry, something's happened with your microphone.
He wants to go back one, Christine.
All right, okay, well, thanks.
Is that better, Christine?
Oh yes. What did you do? Well, I can hear it better now.
Yeah. Okay. The area on the right here is a street verge. In this subdivision, there's small parking bays. It's not continuous parking. And this area here, when it was planted, it ended up with about 3 trailer loads of concrete, limestone, and other construction materials being taken out of it. So it's a special site. That's been, the resident there has put in a tree to cover the parking areas. But again, he's been limited by what he can put in because of the intersection designs here. And so you find in most subdivisions that you have these areas which you're going to have limitations about what you can plant. Not necessarily trees, but ground covers will fit into those green spaces. Next slide, please, Kristen. The end result of some of these, one on the left is these trees are about 50 years old from my recollection, but they provide a beautiful avenue of trees alongside the road. They're chewit trees, they're local to the area, and they've provided a shade space in that area, both for the road itself, but also for the footpath that's on the left-hand side of the road. Trees to that height are casting a shadow over those for most of the day. On the right, sorry, you've got a park area and the footpath, and the trees that have been planted along the road there are Agonis flexuosus, and they're spreading to provide a beautiful shade along that footpath, but also collectively you're getting shade across the road as well. Next slide, please. So in summary, the local plants can make livable, sustainable local environments. The canvas that we're given to start with is often highly altered. In the new subdivisions, the actual land forms have been totally changed. A lot of areas, if there's dunes, they've been flattened. If there's wet areas, they've been covered with masses of imported soil. And so we've got something that's a very difficult area to establish vegetation in to start off with. The spaces in which we are working vary massively in scale. Some of the gaps that in the subdivisions we've got around here, where they're 375 square metre blocks, the gap between the curb and the footpath, and then the footpath is hard up against the property boundary, but that gap is only 1 metre or 2 metres wide. So obviously not suitable for growing trees in, but certainly suitable for growing shrubs in. Other areas are large. They're areas in which parks and other open spaces are put into, and so there's opportunities there to use much larger plants in scale, and also to put in the understory and things that go with them. Often the sites have issues beyond the environment of the site that need to be accommodated, and one of the things with street verges particularly, and in the new subdivisions we've got down around here, the street verges are virtually the only place that you can plant any trees, because what's left in the backyards is too small to plant too much in. You've got 375 square metre blocks and 220 square metre houses on them. And so that you're limited there as to where you can plant, but also the size of plant. But there is a native plant for every situation, and the long-term results provide for a comfortable living and working spaces. And I think it's important from a greening perspective of the whole city to not only looking at where we're living, but also looking at the spaces in which we're working, because a lot of them could do with substantial thought around the greening within the working spaces. Thank you.
So thank you, Brett, and I hope that the audio for others was better than the audio for me was during that. But that was a really great presentation. Do we have Sam Ryken online? I didn't notice.
I haven't seen him on the list, but if he is there, he'll speak up.
Right.
Yeah.
The floor is yours, Sam, if you're here.
Christine, what I just wanted to say without Sam being here then, and there may be someone else who can jump in and after we've heard from Karen, who can give us some better ideas. But the reason why I had invited Sam to speak tonight is that is often we focus on tree canopy, tree cover, and we forget that linkages, as Jane has reminded us, aren't just trees either. They're what's under trees as well. They're shrubs, they're sedges, they're those sorts of things. And I really wanted him to talk also about, in particular, focusing on smaller birds, because smaller birds require some of those lower shrubs to move along, and also lots of smaller birds actually require vegetation to be close together. Otherwise they don't, I suppose, have the confidence to actually make the jump between a patch of plants. So that was the key reason for hoping Sam could join us, but maybe I can get some dot points from him. Thanks.
Thank you, Colma. I'd now like to introduce Karen Bettig. I've seen Karen's name on the screen. So Karen is the Program Manager for Land Conservation, Peel Harvey Catchment Council, and she's going to speak to us about appeal perspective. So,
thank you. And I don't have a presentation, I guess. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about, the southern kind of area perspective. So, just I think a few other people have covered various items that are relevant to what I was going to mention. But I guess from a purely appeal perspective, we're in a slightly different situation to Perth in that we've still got quite a significant kind of areas of remnant vegetation and connectivity, but that is rapidly changing with pretty intensive subdivision and infill planting that's gone on, for decades now, but is not stopping anytime soon down this part of the world. And, Perth's urban sprawl is joining up with, Mandurah and beyond now, which obviously has pretty significant implications for urban biodiversity and urban canopy and those kind of things. What I would like to add is that programs like the Keep Cannabis project that focuses on benefits for cockatoos has some really good outcomes for urban canopy, and those projects are really useful to where to guide sort of resource for cockatoos, as well as adding in increasing urban canopy. I did want to also touch on or build on some of Jane Chambers's points in that I think areas like stormwater gardens that are designed not only for water quality benefits, but can have really high biodiversity values. I think we've got one locally in Mandurah that has an understory of sedges and then callistemons, and then they've got an overstory canopy of casuarinas, which, even for a small area, supports a lot of dragonflies, insects, smaller birds, as well as, larger birds. So I think, there's lots of opportunities there to develop those urban stormwater retention areas for biodiversity, not just purely for water holding. The other thing I wanted to mention was just what we're seeing, particularly in peri-urban areas, is fear of vegetation, around fire, around falling limbs. And, with the drought at the moment, we've got a lot of stressed trees and a lot of trees that potentially will drop limbs in wind events and those kind of things. And I think there's a real opportunity to develop under this strategy for awareness and education on how to manage those risks and balance those risks with, as Tom, I think, was saying, there's a species appropriate for every area, and just getting that conversation really nuanced rather than just having this kind of common fear about eucalypts dropping, limbs, and developers saying, I don't want trees in the subdivision because I get lots of complaints and the trees end up getting removed. So I think there's a real opportunity there in that space to raise awareness and get the conversation really nuanced. And yeah, Pilharvey would be happy to promote the survey and to our community down here. And yeah, I know there's potentially a few City of Mandurah people here as well. So yeah, I'm sure they'd be interested in working with the group for the same and working with us to promote the survey and then get improvements. And just my last point is touching on the strategy as a whole of government strategy. So because we still have areas of intact vegetation down here, we're really working hard to advocate for protection of the areas that are left. But unfortunately, the state government has different agendas for a lot of those areas. And yeah, we're seeing the loss far greater than what the strategy is able to replace. I know that's a common theme, but that's a really important message of this. We've got to protect what's left as first and foremost priority, and this strategy complements that, but is really the second tier of that as well. And yeah, that's my main points, I think.
Thank you very much for that, Karen. It's a sort of a sobering point to end on, and I think, you know, the things that you've talked about, they might be. I don't think they're specific to Peel. You know, I think that those sentiments about, you know, fear of vegetation are not just limited to your area. So I can see that. Yeah, there's a lot, you know, of what everyone said tonight. There's a lot of real relevance for all of us for our submissions. We now have time for some question and answers, and perhaps we'll try and have question and answers for a few minutes, and then we can have a more broader comments and contributions from people. I do ask that you raise your hand, and between us, Colma and I will try to keep an eye on all of the hand raises and be able to go from one to another. You know, you're fitting across two screens on my computer, so the raise hand. Where did I find it? It's in reactions, and it's in raise hand. So Robin Devonish or James Mummy has raised a hand. So James, I'll hand over to you. Unmute.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Robin, and thank you, everybody. Can you hear me okay? A question to Nick Cook, if you're still with us, about the Perth lost 20% of its canopy in a report to be released. Can you give us some more details about the source of that information, please?
Yeah, sure. That information was provided by Walga, and so it was information based on the DPIRD canopy dashboard. Sorry, not DPIRD. Sorry, there's too many acronyms here. DPLH. So that was quoted in a Walga recent budget submission to the state government.
DPLH canopy dashboard.
Correct.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question? Mike Norman?
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering why the government has concern about the heat island effect. It's a point I made on the chat. When I see new suburbs of affordable housing is houses jammed together, basically the gutters touching, and I see it all over the outskirts of Perth. They're all grey roofs or black roofs. There's very little room for any vegetation at all. And all those grey roofs create a huge heat island effect. So why is there concern by the government about a heat island effect when we're getting suburbs of grey or black roofs? And you can, you know, it's happening all over Australia. Promoted by Colorbond and others, by the way.
Mike, is that a rhetorical question? Or do you want a response from one of our speakers?
Well, it just seems to me people are talking about a heat island effect, and these are the suburbs we're now building. I don't understand why there's concern about a heat island effect when this is what's happening in Perth. A lot of the new suburbs in Perth are houses crowded together with grey roofs. There's very little room for gardens or trees or anything. Might get a little patch of lawn, maybe.
Thanks for the comment, Mike. Now I've got Sue Conlon has a question. Over to you, Sue. Just unmute.
Thank you, Christine. Giz Watson suggested that it should be legislated the 30% canopy cover. How difficult is that? Otherwise, she believes that it doesn't have any legs. This is going to be run by WAPC, and they're the ones who are approving these developments that are jammed together. They got 1 metre verges. We need to bring the 3 metre verge back into our planning. It's actually going to cost us more money in the long run for health. So can we legislate Does anybody know?
Well, that's certainly a question we can ask of DPLH, but it is a bit like the what is it, the cat with the canaries, or the fox in the hen house, isn't it? When you think of their role, you know, that they're leading the development of this strategy, and they're also leading the planning the planning process for Perth and Peel.
Can I say something about that? Some local governments, or our local government, has a requirement for a certain percentage of soft area on a block. So at least 15%. I've forgotten what the percentage is, but local governments, my understanding is local governments can do that.
Yes. So Lee has just made a comment in the chat that the City of Cockburn calls for a blanket ban on the use of dark coloured roofing materials at a national level. That was the 16th of March. So thank you for that, Lee. Any other
That should
questions?
certainly be done at a state level or Perth level.
Yeah.
Christine, can I just read another question from the chat?
Yes, sir. Sure.
Yeah. It was a question from Elizabeth, and it was about, do we know the end product of the finalised strategy? And I'm just going to, if Jane's still with us, because she's recently had a meeting with DPLH, a briefing that she gave them as well. Jane, can you just respond to that? I've got some understanding, but I didn't know whether you knew more.
We actually know. We don't know the end product of the finalised strategy. So DPLH this year are trying to determine a strategy. So they actually don't have, as far as I know, they've got the things that they've got on their website as to what it's around, but it's open at this point in terms of what the strategy will be. They're trying to determine it this year, and that is why this survey is so important, because the more input we put in, the greater the likelihood that we will see in the strategy the sorts of things that we want to.
And just adding to that too, when Nicholas Dufty briefed us a couple of weeks ago, those of you who are able to be there, and it was mentioned again tonight how the strategy is a whole of government strategy. But what did also come out of that, because of the questions people asked him, is whilst it is a whole of government strategy, there's no actual commitment at the moment or enforcement for all those different agencies to actually implement aspects of the ultimate strategy. So I suppose when we're doing our comments, they're the other things to think about, is how can we make that more robust so that there is the responsibility for them to deliver.
So are there any other questions or comments?
There's another question in the thing saying from Andrew Horan. Does the planned relaxation of R codes in relation to construction of granny flats have potential impact on canopy loss in urban areas? Should this be a consideration for submissions? Well, I'd say yes. And also earlier on in the chat, Mike Norman let us know that today, I think it was, there was a decision to 125 square metre blocks were announced today. And that's what this government's calling affordable housing. So as Mike said, grey roofs, less garden space, etc.
So I have two Sues with their hand up. Sue Conlon, have you finished? Or do you want to take or have you got another question? And I've also got Sue Howery.
Well, can I just say, and I'll put it in the chat, that the suggestion by Phil Jennings was very good to revive the SAPA, because that seemed to have, it dictated planning. Well, it helped to it was a guiding strategy more than, once they did away with it, we lost our way. So I think pushing for revival of SAPA has to be strong if we can't legislate for 30% canopy cover.
Thanks, Sue. Now, Sue
Just
Howry,
talk about
did you
that
want to?
process. Yeah. The reason the SAPA was dropped was that the federal government didn't approve it because it wasn't good enough.
I did hand over to another Sue. Yeah, so thanks for that comment, Mary. So Sue Howry, you had a question?
Yeah, a little bit more of an administrative one. Just now when we're going out and speaking with different groups and wanting to promote this survey, it's a little bit silly, but can you put like some kind of direct link or some way that we can like share that with people that they can really easily access it?
I'm just going to respond to that, Sue, and say definitely. And just with that also, there's another link to another conversation about similar in the chat. I've got to find it now. And it was to do with, sorry, there's a question here from Ray asking which other organisations are involved in submitting this survey. Can we somehow all work together and publicise the survey as much as possible? Thoroughly agree, Ray, and that's what we're certainly hoping with all of us here tonight. We can continue that ripple effect, and certainly not just Facebook for people, but Instagram and other ways. The survey itself is actually a very simple and short survey, and you can put more detail into it. So it's an easy survey for lots of people to comment on. And as lots of people tonight have said, the government needs to keep hearing more and more from more and more of us how important urban canopy is and keeping what natural areas we've currently got. So that's, and one of the things I was thinking about was whether each of us from tonight could even make a commitment to actually look at getting 10 people in our family or our neighbours or our work. So different people that don't usually fill these things. It's a simple survey. It asks you about where you live and things, but yes.
Right. Just going through, Jane, you've got your hand up. I'll hand over to you.
Yep, just very quickly, following up on Colma's comment. I so far have got guides from Watka Urban Bushland Council and Enviro House for help towards filling in the survey. If there is anybody else that is going to provide guidance, if you could let me know at NatureLink Perth, and I'll put it into the newsletter this next month. So it'll need to be by the end of this month. Or it can, if you do it afterwards, it can be at the end of next month, but it'll be pretty close to the time that it'll be due in. So I'll definitely put it out. We've got 700 people on our network, so it does help to be able to let more people know about what's out there. And I think people do fill out those surveys if they've got the cut and paste rather than not. People look at it and go, I don't know what to say, and they just kind of walk away. So thank you very much to all of the people that have put in significant effort to make those guides. And as I said, if I can help get it out there, please let me do so.
Okay, I might just go to some of the comments in the chat. So I've got Lee, who's asked about whether people know about the ABC Tower bushland and the fight to save it from being cleared for housing. Now, I'm assuming that that's the Erindale Road bushland. And yes, Sonia from the Friends of Erindale Road bushland is in our audience, and they are a member of UBC. So Lee, I'm assuming that that's the one that you meant. Gisela has a comment about Perth in a housing crisis. Yeah, more areas will be sealed by building homes. So there's a long comment here about I guess that conundrum between building for housing to house people and then the regulations around them, and then the maintaining of vegetation. So it is just reminding us that we are dealing with a wicked problem. So Gisela, if you wanted to make any further comment, there's also a housing crisis comment by Karen as well.
Christine, Diana's got her hand up. She's had it up for a while.
So Diana, yeah, so sorry.
Unmute, Diana. Diana, you're muted.
And then we've got Grecian.
Yep, I'm okay now. I'm very concerned about how we look after the verge trees that we do have. I think there's far too much undercutting that goes on, and also you can see the base of the trees where they've been damaged by brush cutting. And I think this needs to be addressed.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Under pruning. Yep.
Yes.
I'll go off to Grecian. Grecian's got her hand up.
I would just like to hope that local governments start enforcing their bylaws about synthetic turf on verges and beyond. And we end up not only with hard surface at the road, but we actually have verges that are hard surfaces. They're based on blue metal. They're very hot, and it's well, it's against the law in some local governments, but it's never enforced. And I think it might be worth going through Wildra or someone to actually request that, you know, these are no longer acceptable.
Thank you, Grecian. Anyone else? If you. So Robin College, would you unmute? Yeah, find the microphone and.
I've thought that the blocks might be getting smaller, which they are getting smaller, but the houses are getting larger. And not just one person living in a 3-bedroom house like I am, but 3 people living in a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2 garage house. So there's not much room left on a block. And with the black roof makes it even worse. So the size of houses are getting much, much larger for a less number of people. Like 6 kids we were and 2 adults in 2-bedroom front and back veranda. So nobody's going to go back to that today, but we are aspiring to becoming the largest houses built in the world. That's a great claim to fame.
Yes, it's a real problem. Now, Grecian, have you got your hand up, or is that still up from the last time? And then Colma wanted to say something.
No.
I just wanted to say a quick thing for all of us to remember, if we can and we want to, is that some of the things that have been raised, like Diana has just done, is about management of what goes in. So whatever happens with the urban greening strategy, whether it's fantastic plantings and other things, or it's doing regeneration around some of the natural areas, we have to make sure they are maintained properly and looked after and cared for. Otherwise, it's pointless.
I think Mary's got her hand up. Mary, did you want to say something?
Yeah, can I just emphasise what Brett raised? This book, the latest edition of Growing Locals, it's got lots of advice and information and covers a number of the issues that have been raised in questions and so on. And I really commend it to everybody, and make sure your local government's got it, because it's got lots of information about, you know, planting around wetlands and you know, public spaces, and as well as home gardens and so on, and as well as species lists for the different landforms. It's a really good reference book to use. It's a really good manual. It's been put together by lots of local experts, as well as Robert Powell and Jane Emerson. Anyway, I commend it. You can get it from the Nats Club or the Wildflower Society. Yeah, really good book.
Thank you, Mary, and Robin also showed us her copy. So, Sue, did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, my comment was that there are so many car parks that aren't canopy covered. If they're not going to be covered by trees, then they should be covered by solar panels. What do we think of that?
Thank you, Sue. Now I think we are heading towards our 7:30 finish time, and I think we're also starting to run out of questions. So if there is just one more question, I'll let you through. But otherwise, I do really want to thank you for being here tonight. Now there are some other key resources, and we will put them together for you. So Colma, did you want to say anything in terms of our next steps and things about resources and I guess as we go through and develop up our guide?
Thanks, Christine, and everybody else. As Christine said, our intent is to get the guide out in a couple of weeks. So if you have other things you think we should be including in that, can you zip them through to me or zip them through to UBC? Certainly fantastic to see what Environment House has done, and thanks Jane for linking us to that yesterday. Really clever way and really simple way of enabling people to both find the survey as well as actually see some suggested responses. And I've forgotten now, Christine, what I put on that slide, but I suppose it's really thinking about, reminding people that the deadline is the 7th of June. And although it seems a long way off, what Nicholas was telling us was that as things are coming in, they're going to consider starting to implement some of them. I'm not quite sure what he means in that sense, but the sooner you can get your comments in now, we're asking you to wait till we've done the guide to get some different guidance if you would like, but otherwise the sooner we get them in, but certainly before the 7th of June would be fantastic. If you've got any links and resources, a bit like Jane was saying, which is fantastic with the Nature Link Perth newsletter, and certainly encourage you. I did send the link in. I'll resend it to people to actually get on board and hook into that newsletter. It's fabulous, and other things that they've got on their pages. Flick them through to us, and also encourage and support others to have their voice heard, which was that bit about also not just people across the conservation movement, but we need to get people everywhere. And it is, if you read the survey yourself, and we've sent that zip through of it, it is a very simple and quite an interesting survey to fill out. So it isn't, you don't have to be a guru to do it. They're really trying to find out what the Perth people want. Thanks, Christine.
Yeah. However, we do want to make sure that our that the conservation side of Canopy, the biodiversity side of Canopy, is well represented, because it could so easily be forgotten. So, as you can see on the slide, we are promising to have our guide out to you before Anzac Day, and then for you to be able to use that to complete your survey, and we'll also publicise it widely through our newsletter lists, and would ask that others through their newsletter lists, that Facebook pages, so that in that late April during May, that we can really make a difference to the number of surveys and the biodiversity lens that survey responses put on this. We have recorded this presentation, so we will use it for making notes ourselves, but we'll also make it available on our website if you want to go back and listen again. But perhaps as we make some notes from the key speakers, or we might get dot points from those who